Welcome to Mysteries and Crime, where shadows hold secrets and silence screams the truth. Tonight, we descend into the chilling depths of British Columbia, a pig farm, a missing woman, and a horrifying discovery beneath the soil. This is the case of Robert Pickton, the pig farmer killer, a name etched in Canada's darkest criminal history. Clue question: what item, seemingly ordinary, ultimately led investigators to the killer? Between the late 1980s and 2002, dozens of women vanished from Vancouver's downtown Eastside. Many were Indigenous, most struggled with poverty or addiction, and all were overlooked. Police would later link these disappearances to one man, Robert "Willie" Pickton, who allegedly lured victims to his farm under the cover of darkness. It was February 6, 2002, when Royal Canadian Mounted Police executed a search warrant on the Pickton farm in Port Coquitlam, just east of Vancouver. They were originally looking into illegal firearms, but what they found would unravel one of the darkest cases in Canadian history. The scene was surreal. Rusted equipment scattered the muddy property. Heaps of debris piled up between animal pens, and the overpowering stench of decay lingered in the cold winter air. Among the refuse, something far more sinister emerged. In a freezer, investigators discovered the remains of two women stored in buckets, some body parts wrapped in plastic. DNA testing would later confirm they belonged to Serena Abbotsway and Mona Wilson, two of the many missing women from the downtown Eastside. The farm quickly transformed into a sprawling crime scene, with forensic teams combing through over 12 acres of mud, filth, and slaughterhouse waste. Dogs were brought in. Excavators raked the earth. Every shed, barn, and trough was opened. What had begun as a weapons bust quickly shifted into a full-blown murder investigation. And as the days passed, the number of victims would rise. And so would the horror. Between 1983 and 2002, more than 60 women vanished from Vancouver's downtown Eastside, one of Canada's most impoverished and vulnerable neighborhoods. These women were not anonymous. They were sisters, daughters, mothers. Serena Abbotsway, a vibrant young woman of Indigenous heritage, had battled mental illness and addiction, but was described by friends as deeply caring and hopeful. Mona Wilson, strong-willed and sharp-tongued, had grown up in foster care. She was last seen in December 2001. Her DNA would later be found on the Pickton farm. Brenda Wolfe, an outreach worker turned missing person. Georgina Papin, a mother of 7. Angela Jardine, diagnosed with schizophrenia. All were part of the same overlooked population. According to families, their disappearances were initially met with silence, their case files left to gather dust. Many of the women were Indigenous, overrepresented in the statistics of missing persons and victims of violence. Allegedly, systemic bias and a lack of urgency contributed to delays in investigating their disappearances. For years, family members posted flyers, held vigils, and begged police to act. But it wasn't until that cold day in February 2002 that the nightmare began to unravel. To this day, only 33 women have been positively identified as connected to the case. Yet many believe the true number of victims is much higher. Their names, faces, and stories have become symbols of the broader tragedy, and a haunting reminder of those society often chooses not to see. Robert William Pickton, known as Willie, was a pig farmer born in 1949 in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Raised on the family farm with his brother and sister, Pickton was described by neighbors as quiet, eccentric, and unsettling. The Pickton property was large, over 10 acres, filled with machinery, outbuildings, and pigs. The family had inherited the land decades earlier, and over time it became both a slaughterhouse and a dumping ground. Locals referred to the place as a junkyard, but few imagined the horrors it concealed. According to reports, Pickton would frequently visit Vancouver's downtown Eastside, offering women money, alcohol, or drugs in exchange for work or companionship. Allegedly, he would lure them to the farm, where they were never seen again. Police had contact with Pickton multiple times before the 2002 raid. In 1997, a woman had escaped from his property, stabbed and bleeding. She told authorities that Pickton tried to kill her. Charges were filed, but later dropped due to inconsistent testimony. Over the years, there were rumors, tips, even anonymous calls, yet no action was taken. Some witnesses later claimed that the authorities simply didn't care because of who the victims were. Despite these missed opportunities, Pickton remained under the radar until the raid that changed everything. He would eventually be charged with 27 counts of first-degree murder and later convicted on 6, but many believe he took many more lives, and for far too long. Walked freely among the very city he helped destroy. The details of what occurred on the Pickton farm are some of the most disturbing ever uncovered in Canadian criminal history. According to forensic investigators and court testimony, the farm was allegedly a hunting ground, a place where women, lured under false pretenses, were brought to their deaths. Once on the property, they were allegedly intoxicated or drugged, then brutally assaulted. Police later testified that many victims were strangled, others were stabbed, and some, according to reports, were allegedly butchered using the same tools Pickton used to slaughter pigs. Human remains were discovered in shocking conditions, scattered across the property, buried in shallow graves, stuffed into containers, or fed through a wood chipper. Some body parts were intermingled with animal waste. Investigators even found evidence that Pickton may have allegedly mixed human flesh with pork meat and distributed it unknowingly to visitors and possibly local markets. One of the most chilling discoveries came when officers found a freezer containing plastic buckets. Inside were severed heads, hands, and feet, frozen, wrapped, and cataloged like inventory. The scale of the forensic recovery was staggering. Over 200,000 DNA samples were collected. More than 60 dumpsters of potential evidence were transported to labs. Analysts used cadaver dogs, forensic entomology, and soil DNA testing to identify remains. In some cases, only tiny bone fragments or teeth were all that remained. The crime scenes told a consistent story: luring, restraint, torture, and eventual murder. Many of the victims had visible signs of trauma, defensive wounds, binding marks, and post-mortem dismemberment. And yet, Pickton continued undetected for years. Investigators later uncovered a chilling confession. During an undercover operation, an officer posed as a cellmate and recorded Pickton bragging about the murders. According to the transcript, he said he had wanted to kill one more to make it an even 50. That statement, paired with the physical evidence, painted a picture of cold, premeditated violence, a calculated pattern that spanned over a decade. Despite the grotesque details, the case was hampered by the condition of the evidence. Many remains had decomposed or were processed with animal remains. making identification difficult. Forensic anthropologists spent years matching DNA to the list of missing women. In total, Pickton was eventually charged with 27 murders. The court proceeded with 6 counts, citing the difficulty of handling such a massive trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum penalty under Canadian law at the time. Yet the full truth may never be known. Not all victims have been identified. Not all remains have been found. And the question still echoes. How could something so horrific happen for so long without anyone stopping it? By the early 2000s, the disappearances from Vancouver's downtown Eastside had sparked growing concern. But official investigations lagged behind. Families and advocacy groups pushed for action, claiming the cases were ignored due to the victims' backgrounds. In 2001, the Vancouver Police and Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a joint task force. However, progress was slow until February 6, 2002, when officers executed a firearms warrant on the Pickton farm. That warrant was the breakthrough. While searching the property, investigators stumbled upon personal belongings of missing women, purses, IDs, and clothing, hidden among farm tools and garbage. This discovery escalated the warrant to a full homicide investigation. The site was sealed off, and a massive forensic excavation began. Authorities set up trailers, brought in dozens of officers and experts, and over the next 22 months, the Pickton farm became the largest crime scene in Canadian history. Processing the Pickton farm was a logistical and scientific nightmare. The terrain was muddy, cluttered, and contaminated by years of animal waste and discarded materials. Human remains were often fragmented, mixed with pig bones, or buried in rotting compost piles. In some cases, bone shards measured less than a centimeter. DNA analysis became the cornerstone. Forensic teams sifted through over 80,000 exhibits. Advanced technologies, including mitochondrial DNA testing and ground-penetrating radar, were deployed to locate and identify remains. Despite their efforts, not all remains were matched to known victims. Some DNA profiles were too degraded to confirm, and the deeper investigators dug, the more questions surfaced about how long it had gone unnoticed, and how much evidence may have been destroyed before anyone came looking. Even years later, some forensic experts returned to reassess remains, using modern techniques, hoping to bring names to the final, unidentified victims. The public response to the Pickton investigation was immediate and visceral. As the extent of the crimes unfolded, shock turned into outrage. Candlelight vigils were held across Vancouver. Murals of missing women began appearing on city walls. Names etched in protest and mourning. Many citizens demanded to know why it took so long. Indigenous communities in particular decried systemic racism, citing years of ignored warnings and overlooked tips. Parents and siblings of the missing spoke out, asking why their pleas were met with silence for so long. For some, the Pickton farm became a symbol, not just of horror, but of institutional failure. Media coverage exploded in the weeks following the farm raid. Front pages across Canada ran headlines like "The Pig Farm Killer" and "House of Horrors." Journalists camped near the crime scene. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Every gruesome detail, every recovered item, became public fodder. Yet the narrative often focused more on the killer than the women he allegedly murdered. Critics accused the media of sensationalism and of dehumanizing the victims, Documentaries, books, and exposés would follow, each peeling back another layer of horror, but many felt the story was no longer just about a serial killer. It was about those who failed to stop him. Despite Robert Pickton's conviction, questions lingered and theories flourished. Some investigators and members of the public believe Pickton did not act alone. The farm was large, the number of disappearances staggering. Could one man have committed so many murders without help? According to reports, Pickton's brother David was also investigated, but never charged. Others questioned if workers or visitors to the farm might have seen or known more than they claimed. A particularly disturbing theory surfaced: that parties were hosted at the farm, with alleged involvement of outsiders in the abuse or exploitation of vulnerable women. No charges were ever filed in connection with these allegations. Police officially closed the case as the work of a lone killer, but many remain unconvinced. And still, the question echoes: was justice fully served? In 2007, after years of legal proceedings, Robert Pickton stood trial for 6 counts of first-degree murder. The trial lasted 11 months and gripped the nation. Evidence included DNA, personal effects, witness testimony, and recordings from the undercover operation. The defense argued that Pickton was not mentally fit and suggested others may have been involved, but the jury disagreed. He was found guilty of second-degree murder on all 6 counts, a legal distinction in Canada, meaning the killings were intentional but not necessarily premeditated. Pickton was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the harshest sentence available under Canadian law at the time. Prosecutors decided not to proceed with the remaining 21 charges, citing the emotional toll on families and the court's limited capacity. For some, it was closure. For others, it was only a fraction of the truth. Even with a conviction, many questions remain. How many women were truly murdered on that farm? Were there accomplices who never faced justice? And why did it take so long for authorities to act on the warnings, cries, and reports? Some of the recovered DNA has never been matched. Families still await answers. And in the shadows of Vancouver, the pain of absence lingers. The Pickton case may be closed in the courts, but in the hearts of many, it remains disturbingly open. Could more have been done? Could lives have been saved? And perhaps most hauntingly, what else remains buried? The Pickton case changed Canada. It prompted public inquiries, led to reforms in how police handle missing persons, especially Indigenous women, and sparked a national reckoning over systemic neglect. The Missing Women Commission of Inquiry, launched in 2010, revealed deep institutional failures and racial bias. New protocols were established, and outreach programs were expanded. But change came too late for dozens of women, whose voices were silenced long before they were heard. Their legacy now lives on in art, policy, and painful memory. A grim reminder of what happens when some lives are valued less than others. And now we turn to you. What are your thoughts on the Robert Pickton case? Could a different turn of events have changed everything? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us tonight on Mysteries and Crime. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.